Today's lesson is all about Stalin's policies in the countryside. This is called collectivization. Stalin rightly knew that the Russian economy was completely backwards, that most of the economy consisted of people working in the fields, peasants, and he stated that the Russian economy had 10 years to catch up with Britain and France or they would be crushed. And so he launched a brutal policy called collectivization. His aims were as follows. He looked around the countryside and saw that large fields were being worked on by thousands of peasants who all owned a little bit of the land. Stalin knew that this was not an efficient way to feed a country, and he wanted Russia to be able to feed itself. He looked to the west and saw that in Britain and America, instead of having thousands of peasants working the field, you would have a handful on a farm who would use modern machinery. So the tractor would plant the crops and then later on in the year harvest them. That was his aim. He also wanted to get the peasants off the land and into the cities working in the new steel factories. Those were his aims. So his aims were to feed the Soviet Union, modernise agriculture and shift the workers into the factories. But how he tried to achieve this was through barbarism and brutality. He decided that these people were to blame for everything that was backwards in the countryside. He looked there and said that any peasant who was wealthy, or any peasant that owned land or owned animals, was a kulak. And a kulak must be liquidated, killed. He sent his men into the fields, the secret police, to round up anyone suspected of being a kulak, which by the definition could be anyone. And these people were either killed on the spot or sent to the gulag, the prison camps. This created anarchy in the countryside. Many farmers and peasants who saw the secret police coming decided that it would be better to kill their own animals and burn their own fields than to hand them over to Stalin. This resulted in the worst man-made famine in history. Up to 10 million people starved to death during the beginning of collectivization. And yet Stalin understood this and continued. In the short term then, Stalin's collectivization policy was a failure because Russia still couldn't feed itself. However, through its brutality and forcing the peasants into these larger collective farms and killing the kulaks or anyone who resisted, eventually Russian agriculture did turn around and did modernize. Now the great question is, was this a success? Well, I would say no, because socially, killing millions of people and starving million people to death could not be seen as a success. It's brutal and horrible. However, to Stalin, who didn't care about human life, he saw it as a success. He achieved his aims. He modernized the Soviet agriculture, he removed any opposition in the countryside, and he moved millions of workers into the factories, which was his aim.